All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in. Let's get comfortable. Pull up a drink and a chair. I guess you pull up a drink. Anyway, let's get started tonight, shall we? Welcome back. I think the overlay should be working now. We'll see. It might. Perhaps. It was working when I was testing earlier before we got started, but then when you start stream, you never know what's going to happen. Anyway, welcome back, welcome back. This is our third night of reading from Dante's Inferno, the first part of his trio of poems, collectively the Divine Comedy, or Commedia as the actual title may be. No one's really sure anymore. So, we've had some guided adventures through hell tonight. Hey, look at that! So, the overlay is working. Fantastic news. And hey, no problem at all with lurking. We love our lurkers around here. Hello, Simba. Yes, you're here right at the start, aren't you? So, as I was saying, we've got the continuation of our guided tour through hell tonight, and we're starting to get down into the more interesting circles. Although to say that it's more interesting is a bit of a misnomer, considering last time we saw the very interestingly ordered sixth circle, where, murder was less severe than suicide, was less severe than blasphemy. Calls value systems into question, certainly. We must remember things are viewed through the lens of their times. But, that's fine. So, let's go ahead and see what we have in store. Oh, before we get back to that, actually, I do have an update to provide. Castellar, one of our regulars around here, was fantastically kind enough to commission a new emote for the channel. And it has been created by the artists Sherilyn and Shizaran. So we do have a new emote available for our friends around here. Let's see, it should be around here somewhere. Yes, here we are. You may find it here up for our subscribers. We've got our very own version of a T emote. Yes, I am extraordinarily pleased with how that turned out, and the amazing generosity shown by Castellar to commission this, and the fantastic skills of the artist who has been credited on the emote, Sherilyn and Shizaran. Immensely appreciated. I love it. So, here's hoping it can find its way into your rotations. Alright, so, with that happy news out of the way, let's go ahead and shift back over into our reading nook, and we will see what sort of extra horrors await us in the depths of the Inferno tonight. We resume tonight from the 19th canto, this Circle 8, Bolgia 3, the Simoniacs. O Simon Magus, O you wretched crew who follow him, pandering for silver and gold, the things of God which should be wedded to love and righteousness. O thieves for hire, now must the trump of judgment sound your doom here in the third fosse of the rim of fire. We had already made our way across to the next grave, and to that part of the bridge which hangs above the midpoint of the fosse. O sovereign wisdom, how thine art doth shine in heaven, on earth, and in the evil world. How justly doth thy power judge and assign. I saw along the walls and on the ground long rows of holes cut in the livid stone. All were cut to a size, and all were round. They seemed to be exactly the same size as those found in the front of my beautiful San Giovanni, built to protect the priests who come to baptize. One of which, not so long since, I broke open to rescue a boy who was wedged and drowning in it. But this enough to undeceive all men. From every mouth a sinner's legs stuck out as far as the calf. The soles were all ablaze, and the joints of the legs quivered and writhed about. Withes and tethers would have snapped in their throes as oiled things blaze upon the surface only. So did they burn, from the heels to the points of their toes. One hell of an athlete's foot. "Master," I said, "who is that one in the fire, who writhes and quivers more than all the others? From him the ruddy flames seem to leap higher." And he to me, "If you wish me to carry you down along that lower bank, you may learn from him who he is, and the evil he has done." And I, "What you will, I will. You are my lord, and I know I depart in nothing from your wish. And you know my mind beyond my spoken word." Dante's a little extra fanboyish toward Virgil. Probably to an unhealthy degree, honestly. We moved to the fourth ridge, and, turning left, my guide descended by a jagged path into the straight and perforated cleft. Thus the good master bore me down the dim and rocky slope, and did not put me down until we reached the one whose legs did penance for him. "Whoever you are, sad spirit," I began, "who lie here with your head below your heels and planted like a stake, speak if you can." I stood like a friar who gives the sacrament to a hired assassin, who, fixed in the hole, recalls him and delays his death a moment. "Are you there already, Boniface? Are you there already?" he cried. "For several years the wretch has lied, and all that gold and all that care! Are you already sated with the treasure for which you dared to turn on the sweet lady and trick and pluck and bleed her at your pleasure?" I stood like one caught in some raillery, not understanding what is said to him, lost for an answer to such mockery. Then Virgil said, "Say to him, I am not he. I am not who you think." And I replied as my good master had instructed me. The sinner's feet jerked madly. Then again his voice rose, this time choked with sighs and tears, and said at last, "What do you want of me, then? If to know who I am drives you so fearfully that you descend the bank to ask it, know that the great mantle was once hung upon me, and in truth I was a son of the she-bear, so sly and eager to push my whelps ahead, that I pursed wealth above, and myself here. Beneath my head are dragged all who have gone before me in burying and selling holy office. There they cower in fissures of the stone. I, too, shall be plunged down when that great feet for whom I took you comes here in his turn. Longer already have I baked my feet and been planted upside down than he shall be before the West sends down a lawless shepherd of uglier deeds to cover him and me. He will be a new Jason of the Maccabees, and just as that king was bent to his high priest's will, so shall the French king do as this one please." Maybe, I cannot say, I grew too brash at this point, for when he had finished speaking, I said, "Indeed! Now, tell me how much catch our Lord required of Peter in guarantee before he put the keys into his keeping. Surely He asked nothing but, "Follow me." Nor did Peter, nor the others ask silver or gold of Matthias, when they chose him for the place the despicable and damned apostle sold. Therefore, stay as you are. This hole well fits you, and keep a good guard on the ill-won wealth that once made you so bold toward Charles of Anjou. And were it not that I am still constrained by the reverence I owe to the great keys you held in life, I should not have been... I should not have refrained from using other words and sharper still. For this avarice of yours grieves all the world, tramples the virtuous, and exalts the evil. Of such as you was the evangelist's vision when he saw she who sits upon the waters, locked with the kings of earth in fornication. She was born with 7 heads, and 10 enormous and shining horns strengthened and made her glad as long as love and virtue pleased her spouse. Gold and silver are the gods you adore. In what are you different from the idolater, save that he worships one and you a score? Constantine, what evil marks the hour, not of your conversion, but of the fee the first rich father took from you in dower? And as I sang him this tune, he began to twitch and kick both feet out wildly, as if in rage, or gnawed by conscience, little matter which. And I think, indeed, it pleased my guide. His look was all approval, as he stood beside me, intent upon each word of truth I spoke. He approached, and with both arms he lifted me, and when he had gathered me against his breast, remounted the rocky path out of the valley. Nor did he tire of holding me clasped to him until we reached the topmost point of the arch, which crosses from the 4th to the 5th rim of the pits of woe. Arranged upon the bridge, he tenderly set down the heavy burden he had been pleased to carry up that ledge, which would have been hard climbing for a goat. Here I looked down on still another moat. All right, that brings us to the end of the 19th canto, and Dante has some opinions about Constantine. Lord, oh Lord, does he have some opinions, and he lets him have it. And, as is appropriate in any self-insert fanfic, his guide is very happy with those opinions being voiced, so he must be right. They must be correct opinions to be had and shared around and published for the world to see. Oh, Dante. Oh, Dante. All right, let's go ahead and continue with the Canto 20. Circle 8. Bolgia 4. The fortune tellers and diviners. Oop, get back here. Now I must sing new griefs, and my verses strain to form the matter of the 20th canto, of Canticle 1, the Canticle of Pain. My vantage point permitted a clear view of the depths of the pit below, a desolation bathed with the tears of its tormented crew. Who moved about the circle of the pit at about the pace of a litany procession. Silent and weeping, they wound round and round it. And when I looked down from their faces, I saw that each of them was hideously distorted between the top of the chest and the lines of the jaw. For the face was reversed on the neck, and they came on backwards, staring backwards at their loins, for to look before them was forbidden. Someone, sometime, in the grip of a palsy, may have been distorted so, but never to my knowledge, nor do I believe the like was ever seen. Reader, so may God grant you to understand my poem and profit from it. Ask yourself how I could check my tears when near at hand I saw the image of our humanity distorted so that the tears that burst from their eyes ran down the cleft of their buttocks. Certainly, I wept. I leaned against the jagged face of a rock and wept so that my guide said, "Still, still, like the other fools. There is no place for pity here. Who is more arrogant within his soul? Who is more impious than one who dares to sorrow at God's judgment? Lift up your eyes and see him the earth swallowed before all the Thebans, at which they cried out, 'Whither do you flee, Amphiaraus? Why do you leave the field?' And he fell headlong through the gaping earth to the feet of Minos, where all sin must yield. Observe how he has made a breast of his back. In life he wished to see too far before him, and now he must crab backwards round this track. And see Tiresias, who by his arts succeeded in changing himself from man to woman, transforming all his limbs and all his parts. Later, he had to strike the twined serpents once again with his conjurer's wand before he could resume his manly lineaments. And there is Aruns, his back to that one's belly, the same who in the mountains of Luni, tilled by the people of Carrara's valley, made a white marble cave his den, and there, with unobstructed view, observed the sea, and the turning constellations year by year. And she, whose unbound hair flows back to hide her breasts, which you cannot see, and who also wears all of her hairy parts on that other side, was Manto, who searched countries far and near, then settled where I was born. In that connection, there is a story I would have you hear. Tiresias was her sire. After his death, Thebes, the city of Bacchus, became enslaved, and for many years she roamed about the earth. High in sweet Italy, under the Alps that shut the Tyrolean gate of Germany, there lies a lake known as Benacus roundabout. Though through endless falls, more than 1,001, Mount Apennine from Garda to Val Camonica is freshened by the waters that flow down into that lake. At its center is a place where the bishops of Brescia, Trentine, and Verona might all give benediction with equal grace. Peschiera, the beautiful fortress, strong in war against the Brescians and the Bergamese, sits at the lowest point along that shore. There, the waters Benacus cannot hold within its bosom, spill and form a river that winds away through pastures green and gold. But once the water gathers its full flow, it is called Mincius rather than Benacus. From there to Guverno, where it joins the Po. Still near its source, it strikes a plain, and there it slows and spreads, forming an ancient marsh, which in the summer heats pollutes the air. The terrible virgin, passing there by chance, saw dry land at the center of the mire, untilled, devoid of all inhabitants. There, shunning all communion with mankind, she settled with the ministers of her arts, and there she lived, and there she left behind her vacant corpse. Later, the scattered men who lived nearby assembled on that spot, since it was well defended by the fen. Over those whited bones they raised the city, and for her who had chosen the place before all others, they named it, with no further augury, Mantua. but more people lived there once before sheer madness prompted Casalodi to let Pinamont play him for a damn dunce. Therefore, I charge you, should you ever hear other accounts of this, to let no falsehood confuse the truth, which I have just made clear. And I to him, Master, within my soul your word is certainty, and any other would seem like the dead lumps of burned-out coal. But tell me, of those people moving down to join the rest, are any worth my noting? For my mind keeps coming back to that alone. And he, that one whose beard spreads like a fleece over his swarthy shoulders, was an augur in the days when so few males remained in Greece that even the cradles were all but empty of sons. He chose the time for cutting the cable at Orly, and Colchis joined him in those divinations. He is Eurypylus. I sing him somewhere in my high tragedy. You will know the place, who know the whole of it. The other there, the one beside him with the skinny shanks, was Michael Scott, who mastered every trick of magic fraud, a prince of Mountebank. See Guido Bonatti there. See as Dante, who now would be wishing he had stuck to his last, but repents too late, though he repents of plenty. And see, on every hand the wretched hags, who left their spinning and sewing for soothsaying and casting of spells with herbs and dolls and rags. But come, Cain with his bush of thorns appears already on the wave below Seville, above the boundary of the hemispheres. And the moon was full already yesternight, as you must well remember from the wood, for it certainly did not harm you with it when its light shone down upon your way before the dawn. And as he spoke to me, we travelled on. To place fortune-tellers this deep within the bowels of hell says a lot. Like, I know, there's a disdain for the fortune-tellers. They tread upon the realm of God by feigning knowledge that shouldn't be theirs, etc., etc., etc. But seriously, murderers get a less severe punishment than they do? Please. Please. All right, let's continue with the 21st canto. Lots of notes on this one. Canto 21, Circle 8, Bolgia 5, The Grafters. Thus, talking of things which my comedy does not care to sing, we passed from one arch to the next, until we stood upon its summit. There, we checked our steps to study the next fosse, and the next vain lamentations of the Malbolge. Awesomely dark and desolate it was. As in the Venetian arsenal, the winter through there boils the sticky pitch to caulk the seams of the sea-battered bottoms when no crew can put to sea. Instead of which, one starts to build its ship anew, one plugs the planks which may have sprung in many foreign parts. Some hammer at a mast, some at a rib, some make new oar, some braid and coil new lines, one patches up the mainsail, one the jib. So, but by art divine and not by fire, viscid pitch boiled in the fosse below, and coated all the bank with gluey mire. I saw the pitch, but I saw nothing in it, except the enormous bubbles of its boiling, which swelled and sank, like breathing, through all the pit, And as I stood and stared into that sink, my master cried, "Take care," and drew me back from my exposed position on the brink. I turned like one who cannot wait to see the thing he dreads, and who, in sudden fright, runs while he looks, his curiosity competing with his terror. And at my back, I saw a figure that came running toward us across the bridge. A demon, huge and black. Ah, what a face he had, all hate and wildness. Galloping so with his great wings outspread, he seemed the embodiment of all bitterness. Across each high-hunched shoulder he had thrown one haunch of a sinner, whom he held in place with a great talon round each ankle bone. "Black talons of our bridge," he began to roar, "I bring you one of Santa Zita's elders. Scrub him down while I go back for more. I planted a harvest of them in that city. Everyone there is a grafter except Ponturo. There, yes is no, and no is yes for a fee." Down the sinner plunged, and at once the demon spun from the cliff. No mastiff ever sprang more eager from the leash to chase a felon. Down plunged the sinner, and sank to reappear with his backside arched, and his face and both his feet glued to the pitch, almost as if in prayer. But the demons under the bridge, who guard that place, and the sinners who are thrown to them, bawled out, "You're out of bounds here for the sacred face! This is no dip in the Sergio. Take your look and then get down in the pitch, and stay below unless you want a taste of a grappling hook." Then they raked him with more than 100 hooks, bellowing, "Here, you dance below the covers! Graft all you can there! No one checks your books!" They dipped him down into that pitch exactly as a chef makes scullery boys dip meat in a boiler, holding it with their hooks from floating free. Then the master said, "You had best not be seen by these fiends till I am ready. Crouch down here. One of these rocks will serve you as a screen, and whatever violence you see done to me, you have no cause to fear. I know these matters. I have been through this once, and come back safely." With that, he walked on past the edge of the bridge, and it wanted all his courage to look calm, from the moment he arrived on the 6th ridge. With that same storm and fury that arouses all the house when the hounds leap at a tramp who suddenly falls to pleading where he pauses, so rushed those fiends from below, and all the pack pointed their gleaming pitchforks at my guide. But he stood fast and cried to them, "Stand back! Before those hooks and grapples make too free, send up one of your crew to hear me out. Then ask yourselves if you still care to rip me." All cried as one, "Let Malacoda go!" So the pack stood, and one of them came forward, saying, "What good does he think this will do?" "Do you think, Malacoda," my good master said, "you would see me here, having arrived this far already, safe from you and every dread, without divine will and propitious fate? Let me pass on, for it is willed in heaven that I must show another this dread state." The demon stood there on the flinty brim, so taken aback he let his pitchfork drop, then said to the others, "Take care not to harm him." "Oh, you crouched like a cat," my guide called to me, "among the jagged rock piles of the bridge. Come down to me, for now you may come safely." Hearing him, I hurried down the ledge, and the demons all pressed forward when I appeared, so that I feared they might not keep their pledge. So once I saw the Pisan infantry march out under truce from the fortress at Caprona, staring in fright at the ranks of the enemy, I pressed the whole of my body against my guide, and not for an instant did I take my eyes from those black fiends who scowled on every side. They swung their forks, saying to one another, "Shall I give him a touch in the rump?" and answered, "Sure, give him a taste to pay him for his bother." But the demon who was talking to my guide turned round and cried to him, "And he's their snatcher!" And then to us, "There's no road on this side. The arch lies all in pieces in the pit. If you must go on, follow along this ridge. There's another cliff to cross by just beyond it. In just 5 hours it will be, since the bridge fell 1,266 years and a day. That was the time the big quake shook all hell. Send a squad of my boys along that way to see if anyone's airing himself below. You can go with them. There will be no foul play. Francetter here, Grizzly, Hampton." He began to order them. "You two, Dead Dog, Curlybeard, take charge of a squad of 10. Take Grafter and Dragontooth along with you. Big Tusk, Catclaw, Grandpa, and Crazy Red, keep a sharp lookout on the boiling glue as you move along, and see that these gentlemen are not molested until they reach the crag where you can find a way across the den."
"In the name of heaven, master," I cried, "what sort of guides are these? Let's go on alone if you know the way. Who can trust such an escort? If you are as wary as you used to be, you surely see them grind their teeth at us, and knot their beetle brows so threateningly."
And he, "I do not like this fear in you. Let them gnash and knot as they please. They menace only the sticky wretches simmering in that stew." They turned along the left bank in a line, but before they started, all of them together had stuck their pointed tongues out as a sign to their captain that they wished permission to pass, and he made a trumpet of his ass. This was an interesting canto. So this is one of the first that we've seen where the highlight isn't so much on the inmates and those being punished, but more on the jailers themselves. We're looking more at the demons that are keeping the ways rather than any of the actual sinners here. It's kind of a divergence and a difference of tone. A little bit more dialogue, a little bit more back and forth, and the introduction of a few new characters, shall we say. All right. Canto 22, Circle 8, Bolgia 5, The Grafters. I have seen horsemen breaking camp. I have seen the beginning of the assault, the march and muster, and at times the retreat and riot. I have been where chargers trampled your land, O Aretines. I have seen columns of foragers, shocks of tourney, and running of tilts. I have seen the endless lines, march to bells, drums, trumpets from far and near. I have seen them march on signals from a castle. I have seen them march with native and foreign gear, but never yet have I seen horse or foot, nor ship in range of land, nor sight of star, take its direction from so low a toot. Yes, a reminder that the boss of these demons, as way of giving orders to his crew, passed gas, yes. We went with the 10 fiends, a savage crew, but in church with saints with stew pots in the tavern, as the old proverb wisely bids us do. All my attention was fixed upon the pitch, to observe the people who were boiling in it, and the customs and punishments of that ditch. As dolphins surface and begin to flip their arched backs from the sea, warning the sailors to fall to and begin to secure ship, so now and then some soul, to ease his pain, showed us a glimpse of his back above the pitch, and quick as lightning disappeared again. And as,
At the edge of a ditch, frogs squat about, hiding their feet and bodies in the water, leaving only their muzzles sticking out. So stood the sinners in that dismal ditch. But as Curlybeard approached, only a ripple showed where they had ducked back into the pitch. I saw the dread of its haunts me to this day. One linger a bit too long. As it sometimes happens, one frog remains when another spurts away, and Catclaw, who was nearest, ran a hook through the sinner's pitchy hair and hauled him in. He looked like an otter dripping from the brook. I knew the names of all the fiends by then. I had made a note of them at the first muster, and, marching, had listened and checked them over again.
"Hey, Crazy Red!" the crew of demons cried all together. "Give him a taste of your claws! Dig him open a little! Off with his hide!"
And I then, "Master, can you find out, please, the name and history of that luckless one who has fallen into the hands of his enemies?" My guide approached that wraith from the hot tar and asked him whence he came. The wretch replied, "I was born and raised in the kingdom of Navarre. My mother placed me in service to a knight, for she had borne me to a squanderer who killed himself when he ran through his birthright. Then I became a domestic in the service of good King Tybalt, where I began to graft, and I account for it in this hot crevice." And Pigtusk, who at the ends of his lower lip shot forth 2 teeth more terrible than a boar's, made the wretch feel how one of them could rip. The mouse had come among bad cats, but here Curlybeard locked arms with him around him, crying,
"I've got hold of him! The rest stand clear!"
And, turning his face to my guide,
"If you want to ask him anything else," he added, "ask away, before the others tear him limb from limb."
And my guide to the sinner, "I should like to know if among the other souls beneath the pitch are any Italians." And the wretch, "Just now I left a shade who came from parts nearby, where I would I were still in the pitch with him, but then these hooks would not be giving me cause to cry." And suddenly the grafter bellowed in great heat,
"We've stood enough."
"Oh." And he hooked the sinner's arm, and, breaking it, ripped off a chunk of meat. Then Dragontooth wanted to play too, reaching down for a catch at the sinner's legs, but Curlybeard wheeled round and round with a terrifying frown. And when the fiends had somewhat given ground, and calmed a little, my guide, without delay, asked the wretch who was staring at his wound, "Who was the sinner from whom you say you made your evil-starred departure to come ashore among these fiends?" And the wretch, "It was the shade of Friar Gomito of Calura, the crooked stem of every fraud. When his master's enemies were in his hands, he won high praise from them. He took their money without case or docket, and let them go. He was in all his dealings no petty bursar, but a kingly pocket. With him, his endless crony in the fosse, is Don Michel Zanche of Logodoro. They babble about Sardinia without pause. But look, see that fiend grinning at your side. There's much more that I should like to tell you, but oh, I think he means to grate my hide." But their grim sergeant wheeled, sensing foul play, and turning on Cramper, who seemed set to strike, ordered,
"Clear off, you buzzard! Clear off, I say!"
If either of you would like to see and hear Tuscans or Lombards," the pale sinner said, I can lure them out of hiding, if you'll stand clear, and let me sit here at the edge of the ditch and get all these black talons out of sight, for while they're here, no one will leave the pitch. In exchange for myself, I can fish you up as pretty a mess of souls as you like. I have only to whistle the way we do when one of us gets free." Dead Dog raised his snout as he listened to him, then, shaking his head,
"Listen to the grafter, spitting his tricks so he can jump from the brim."
And the sticky wretch, who was all treachery, "Oh, I am more than tricky when there's a chance to see my friends in greater misery."
Helkin, against the will of all the crew, could hold no longer.
"You jump,"
he said to the scheming wretch.
"I won't come after you at a gap, like a hawk after a mouse. We'll clear the edge and hide behind the bank. Let's see if your tricks are enough for all of us."
Reader, here is a new game. The fiends withdrew from the bank's edge, and Dead Dog, who at first was most against it, led the savage crew. The Navarrese chose his moment carefully, and planting both his feet against the ground, he leaped, and in an instant he was free. The fiends were stung with shame, and of the lot, Helkin most, who had been the cause of it. He leaped out, madly bellowing, "You're caught!" But little good it did him. Terror pressed harder than wings. The sinner dove from sight, and the fiend in full flight had to raise his breast. A duck, when the falcon dives, will disappear. Exactly so, all in a flash, while he returns defeated and wary up the air. Grizzly, in a rage at the sinner's flight, flew after Helkin, hoping the wraith would escape, so he might find an excuse to start a fight. And as soon as the grafter sank below the pitch, Grizzly turned his talons against Helkin, locked him with claw to claw above the ditch. But Helkin was sparrowhawk enough for two, and clawed him well, and ripping one another, they plunged together into the hot stew. The heat broke up the brawl immediately, but their wings were smeared with pitch, and they could not rise. Curlybeard, upset at his company, commanded four to fly up to the other coast. At once, with all their grapples at top speed, the fiends divided, each one to his post. Some, on the near edge, some along the far, they stretched their hooks out to the clotted pair, who were already cooked deep through the scar of their first burn, and turning to one side, we slipped off, leaving them thus occupied. All right, so that brings us to the end of Canto 22. And that time was kind of interesting. We saw the demons partaking in the torment of their inmates, but also, as is only appropriate, the demons can't come out smelling like roses in this. Yes, they're jailers here, but they can't be winning. So the con man, the grafters, the con man had to get his own little digs in. And so, despite his little bit of torture, his scheme did work, and he was able to find himself back in the pit, running from the torment of the demons back into the burning pitch below, which is the lesser of those pains. Crazy, but it's a nice little caveat where the things aren't always going to be going just as you might expect. Alright, let's continue. We've got about 15 minutes until our next break comes up, or our first break comes up. So, let's get through at least one more canto. Canto 23. Circle 8. Bolgia 6. The Hypocrites. Silent, apart, and unattended we went, as minor friars go when they walk abroad, one following the other. The incident recalled the fable of the mouse and the frog that Aesop tells, for compared attentively point by point, pig is no closer to hog than the one case to the other. And as one thought springs from another, so the comparison gave birth to a new concern, at which I caught my breath in fear. This thought ran through my mind. These fiends, through us, have been made ridiculous, and have suffered insult and injury of a kind to make them smart. Unless we take good care, now rage is added to their natural spleen. They will hunt us down as greyhounds hunt the hare. Already I felt my scalp grow tight with fear. I was staring back in terror as I said, Master,
Unless we find concealment here, and soon, I dread the rage of the fiends. Already they are yelping on our trail. I imagine them so vividly I can hear them now.
And he, were I a pane of leaded glass, I could not summon your outward look more instantly into myself than I do your inner thought. Your fears were mixed already with my own, with the same suggestion and the same dark look, so that of both I form one resolution. The right bank may be sloping. In that case, we may find some way down to the next pit, and so escape from the imagined chase. He had not finished answering me thus, when, not far off, their giant wings outspread, I saw the fiends come charging after us. Seizing me instantly in his arms, my guide, like a mother wakened by a midnight noise to find a wall of flame at her bedside, who takes her child and runs, and more concerned for him than for herself, does not pause even to throw a wrap about her, raised me, turned, and down the rugged bank from the high summit flung himself down supine onto the slope, which walls the upper side of the next pit. Water that turns the great wheel of a land mill never ran faster through the end of a sluice at the point nearest the paddles, as down that hill my guide and master bore me on his breast, as if I were not a companion but a son, and the soles of his feet had hardly come to rest on the bed of the depth below, when, on the height we had just left, the fiends beat their great wings. But now they gave my guide no cause for fright, for the providence that gave them the fifth pit to govern as their ministers of its will takes from their souls the power of leaving it. About us now, in the depth of the pit, we found a painted people, weary and defeated. Slowly, in pain, they paced it round and round. All wore great cloaks cut to as ample a size as those worn by the Benedictines of Cluny. Their enormous hoods were drawn over their eyes. The outside is all dazzle, golden and fair. The inside, lead, so heavy that Frederick's capes compared to these would seem as light as air. Oh, weary mantle for eternity! We turned to the left again along their course, listening to their moans of misery. But they moved so slowly down that barren strip, tired by their burden, that our company was changed at every movement of the hip. And walking thus, I said,
As we go on, may it please you to look about among these people, for any whose name or history may be known?
And one who understood Tuscan cried to us there as we hurried past,
I pray you, check your speed, and you who run so fast through the sick air, it may be I am one who will fit your case.
And at his words my master turned and said, Wait now, then go with him at his own pace. I waited there, and saw among that track 2 souls, who seemed in haste to be with me. But the narrow way and their burden held them back. When they had reached me down that narrow way, they stared at me in silence and amazement. Then one turned to the other. I heard one say,
This one seems, by the motion of his throat, to be alive. And if they are dead, how is it they are allowed to shed the leaden coat?
And then to me,
O Tuscan, come so far to the college of the sorry hypocrites, do not disdain to tell us who you are.
Hello, Zoe. And I
was born and raised a Florentine, on the green and lovely banks of Arno's waters. I go with the body that was always mine. But who are you, who, sighing as you go, distill in floods of tears that drown your cheeks? What punishment is this that glitters so? These burnished robes are thick lead, said one, and are hung on us like counterweights, so heavy that we, with their weary fulcrums, creak and groan. jovial friars and Bolognese were we. We were chosen jointly by your Florentines to keep the peace, an office usually held by a single man near the Gardingo. One still may see the sort of peace we kept. I was called Catalano, he Loderingo. I began, "Oh, friars, you're evil!" And then I saw a figure crucified upon the ground by 3 great stakes. I fell still in awe. When he saw me there, he began to puff great sighs into his beard, convulsing all his body. And Friar Catalano, following my eyes, said to me, "That one nailed across the road counseled the Pharisees that it was fitting one man be tortured for the public good. Naked he lies fixed there, as you see, in the path of all who pass. There he must feel the weight of all through all eternity. His father-in-law and the others of the council, which was a seed of wrath to all the Jews, are similarly staked for the same evil." Then I saw Virgil marvel for a while over that soul so ignominiously stretched on the cross in hell's eternal exile. Then, turning, he asked the friar, if your law permit, can you tell us if somewhere along the right there is some gap in the stone wall of the pit, through which we too may climb to the next brink, without the need of summoning the black angels and forcing them to raise us from this sink?" He, "Nearer than you hope. There is a bridge that runs from the great circle of the scarp and crosses every ditch from ridge to ridge, except that in this it is broken. But with care you can mount the ruins which lie along the slope and make a heap on the bottom." My guide stood there motionless for a while, with a dark look. At last he said, "He lied about this business who spears the sinners yonder with his hook." And the friar, "Once at Bologna, I heard the wise in discussing the devil's sins. Among them I heard that he is a liar and the father of lies." When the sinner had finished speaking, I saw the face of my sweet master darken a bit with anger. He set off at a great stride from that place. And I turned from that weighted hypocrite to follow in the prints of his dear feet. All right, so we've got our first ad starting up in about 3 minutes. So let's take a quick moment and take a perspective check. So these last few cantos have actually been very different from what we've seen so far. Earlier on, it was a lot more passive voice. Things were happening, and Dante was just reporting what he saw. There wasn't any participation, there wasn't any real interaction, aside from a conversation here or there. These last few cantos have been starkly different. He's been an active participant. He's been interacting with demons and sinners both. There's been some antagonism, both of the sinners and of the demons, and back and forth. And we're starting to see a little bit of, oddly enough, some life coming to hell as they're going further and further down the circle. It's very interesting how as you're this far down, the 8th circle of hell, for God's sake, is already more alive than many of those we saw earlier on, where the punishments are ostensibly lighter. All right, let's go ahead and kick off our ad break. Take the chance to stand up, stretch your legs, top up your drinks, attend to the needs of your fuzzy friends, and we'll be back in just a few minutes to continue our reading of Dante's Inferno from the 24th canto.
All right, we are back. So, we're seeing some more back and forth, some exploration, and guided tour through the depths of hell, and a little bit of interaction with the locals now, both the demonic persuasion and those who are rather more inmates. So, let's see if this trend of more interactivity continues as we go deeper through the 8th circle with Canto 24, Circle 8, Bolgia 7, The Thieves. Interesting that the thieves are placed so deep within. Recall, murderers were in the 7th circle. So, In the turning season of the youthful year, when the sun is warming his rays beneath Aquarius, and the days and nights already begin to near, their perfect balance. The hoarfrost copies, then, the image of his white sister on the ground. But the first sun wipes away the work of his pen. The peasants who lack fodder then arise, and look about and see the fields all white, and hear their lambs bleat. Then they smite their thighs, go back into the house, walk here and there, pacing, fretting, wondering what to do. Then come outdoors again, and their despair falls from them when they see how the earth's face has changed in so little time, and they take their staffs and drive their lambs to feed. So in that place, when I saw my guide and master's eyebrows lower, my spirits fell, and I was sorely vexed. And as quickly came the plaster to the sore, for when he had reached the ruined bridge, he stood and turned on me that sweet and open look which he had greeted me in the dark wood. When he had paused and studied carefully the heap of stones, he seemed to reach some plan, for he turned and opened his arms and lifted me, like one who works and calculates ahead, and is always ready for what happens next. So, raising me above that dismal bed, to the top of one great slab of the fallen slate, he chose another, saying, "Climb here, but first, test it, to see if it will hold your weight." It was no climb for a lead-hung hypocrite, for scarcely we, he light and I assisted, could crawl handhold by handhold from the pit. And were it not that the bank along this side was lower than the one down which we had slid, I, at least, I will not speak for my guide, would have turned back. But as all of the vast rim of Malebolge leans toward the lowest well, and so each succeeding valley and each brim is lower than the last, we climbed the face and arrived, by great exertion, to the point where the last rock had fallen from its place. My lungs were pumping as if they could not stop. I thought I could not go on, and I sat exhausted, the instant I had clambered to the top. "Up, on your feet! This is no time to tire," my master cried. "The man who lies asleep will never wake in fame, and his desire and all his life drift past him like a dream, and the traces of his memory fade from time like smoke in air, or ripples on a stream. Now, therefore, rise, control your breath, and call upon the strength of soul that wins all battles, lest it sink in the gross body's fall. There's a longer ladder yet to climb. This much is not enough. If you understand me, show that you mean to profit from your time." I rose and made my breath appear more steady than it really was, and I replied,
Lead on, as it pleases you to go. I'm strong and ready.
We picked our way up the cliff, a painful climb, for it was narrower, steeper, and more jagged than any we'd crossed up to that time. I moved along, talking to hide my faintness, when a voice that seemed unable to form words rose from the depths of the next chasm's darkness. I do not know what it said, though by then the sage had led me to the top of the next arch. But the speaker seemed in a tremendous rage. I was bending over the brim, but living eyes could not plumb to the bottom of that dark. Therefore I said,
Master, let me advise that we cross over and climb down the wall, for just as I hear the voice without understanding, so I look down and make out nothing at all.
I make no other answer than the act, the master said. The only fit reply to a fit request is silence, and the fact. So we moved down the ridge to the stone pier that shores the end of the arch on the 8th bank, and there I saw the chasm's depths made clear. And there great coils of serpents met my sight, so hideous a mass that even now the memory makes my blood run cold with fright. Let Libya boast no longer, for though its sands breed Cheledrids, Jaculi, Farians, Centurions, and two-headed amphispans, it never bred such a variety of vipers, no, not with all Ethiopia and all the lands that lie by the Red Sea. Amid that swarm, naked and without hope, people ran terrified, not even dreaming of a hole to hide in or heliotrope. Their hands were bound behind by coils of serpents, which thrust their heads and tails between the loins and bunched in front a mass of knotted torments. One of the damned came racing round a boulder, and as he passed us, a great snake shot up and bit him where the neck joins with the shoulder. No mortal pen, however fast it flashed over the page, could write down O or I as quickly as he flamed and fell in ash. And when he was dissolved into a heap upon the ground, the dust rose of itself, and immediately resumed its former shape. Precisely so, the philosophers declare, the phoenix dies and then is reborn again, when it approaches its 500th year. Hang tight, we're dropping some frames. Connectivity being fun as always. This is a bad one. Alright, hang on. Ooh, boy. Having some bad ping even just getting out. Okay. Twitch seems to be a little bit happier. YouTube is still not very pleased with us. Let's update or take a look here, make sure that we're... Oh, nope, Twitch just went to unstable. Alright, that makes sense. We're about okay. Okay, I think we've stopped dropping frames. Make sure that our monitors look good. Okay, I think we're back to normal. Precisely so, philosophers declare. The phoenix dies and then is reborn again when it approaches its 500th year. It lives on tears of balsam and of incense. In all its life it eats no herb or grain, and nard and precious myrrh sweeten its cerements. And, as a person fallen in a fit, possessed by a demon or some other seizure that fetters him without knowing it, struggles up to his feet and blinks his eyes, still stupefied by the great agony he had just passed, and, looking round him, sighs. Such was the sinner when at last he rose. O power of God, how dreadful is thy will, which, in its vengeance, rains such fearful blows. Then my guide asked him who he was, and he answered reluctantly, "Oh, long ago I reigned into this gullet from Tuscany. I am Vanifucci, the beast, a mule among men, and I chose the bestial life above the human. Savage Pistoia was my fitting den." And I, to my guide,
Detain him a bit longer, and ask what crime it was that sent him here. I knew him as a man of blood and anger.
The sinner, seeing me, seemed discomforted, but he turned and fixed his eyes upon my face with a look of dismal shame. At length he said,
"That you have found me out among the strife and misery of this place grieves my heart more than did the day that cut me from my life. I am forced to answer truthfully. I am put down so low because it was I who stole the treasure from the sacristy, for which others once were blamed. But that you may find less to gloat about if you escape here. Prick up your ears and listen to what I say. First, Pistoia is emptied of the black. Then Florence changes her party and her laws. From Valdemagra, the god of war brings back a fiery vapor wrapped in turbid air. Then, in a storm of battle at Piceno, the vapor Piceno, the vapor breaks apart the mist, and there every wight shall feel his wounds anew. And I have told you this, that it may grieve you.
Alright, looks like we are continuing the section on the thieves here in the next canto. Canto 25, Circle 8, Bolgia 7, The Thieves. When he had finished this, the thief, to his disgrace, raised his hands and with both fists making figs and cried, "Here, God, I throw them in your face!" Thereat the snakes became my friends, for one coiled itself around the wretch's neck, as if it were saying, "You shall not go on," and another tied his arms behind him again, knotting its head and tail between his loins, so tight he could not move a finger in pain. Pistoia, why have you not decreed to turn yourself to ashes and end your days rather than spread the evil of your seed? In all of hell's corrupt and sunken halls, I found no shade so arrogant toward God. Not even him who fell from the Theban walls. Without another word, he fled, and there I saw a furious centaur race up, roaring, "Where is the insolent blasphemer? Where?" I do not think as many serpents swarm in all of Maremma as he bore on his back, from the haunch to the first sign of our human form. Upon his shoulders, just behind his head, a snorting dragon, whose hot breath set fire to all it touched, lay with its wings outspread. My guide said, "That is Cacus. Time and again, in the shadow of Mount Aventine, he made a lake of blood upon the Roman plain. He does not go with his kin by the blood-red fosse because of the cunning fraud with which he stole the cattle of Hercules, and thus it was his thieving stopped, for Hercules found his den, and gave him perhaps 100 blows with his club, and of them he did not feel the first 10. Meanwhile, the centaur passed along his way, and 3 wraiths came. Neither my guide nor I knew they were there until we heard them say,
"You there? Who are you?"
There our talk fell still, and we turned to stare at them. I did not know them, but by chance it happened, as it often will. One named another.
Where's Kianpa?" he cried. "Why is he falling back?"
I placed a finger across my lips as a signal to my guide. Reader, should you doubt what next I tell, it will be no wonder, for though I saw it happen, I can scarce believe it possible, even in hell. For suddenly, as I watched, I saw a lizard come darting forward on 6 great taloned feet and fasten itself to a sinner, from crotch to gizzard. Its middle feet sank in the sweat and grime of the wretch's paunch. Its forefeet clamped his arms. Its teeth bit through both cheeks. At the same time, its hind feet fastened on the sinner's thighs. Its tail thrust through his legs and closed its coil over his loins. I saw it with my own eyes. No ivy ever grew about a tree as tightly as that monster wove itself limb by limb about the sinner's body. They fused like hot wax, and their colors ran together, until neither wretch nor monster appeared what he had been when he began. Just so, before the running edge of the heat on a burning page, a brown discoloration changes to black as the white dies from the sheet. The other 2 cried out as they looked on.
"Alas, alas, Agnello, how you change! Already you're neither 2 nor 1.
The 2 heads had already blurred and blended. Now 2 new semblances appeared and faded. One face where neither face began nor ended. From the 4 upper limbs of man and beast, 2 arms were made. Then members never seen grew from the thighs and leg, belly and breast. Their former likenesses mottled and sank to something that was both of them and neither, and so transformed, it slowly left our bank. As lizards at high noon of a hot day dart out from hedge to hedge, from shade to shade, and flash like lightning when they cross the way, so toward the bowels of the other 2 shot a small monster, livid, furious, and black as a peppercorn. Its lunge bit through that part of one of them which a man receives his earliest nourishment. Then it fell back, and lay sprawled out in front of the 2 thieves. Its victim stared at it, but did not speak. Indeed, he stood there like a post, and yawned, as if lack of sleep or a fever had left him weak. The reptile stared at him, he at the reptile, and from the wound of one and from the other's mouth 2 smokes poured out and mingled, dark and vile. Now let Lucan be still, with his history of poor Sabellus and Nicidius, and wait to hear what next appeared to me. Of Cadmus and Arethusa be Ovid silent. I have no need to envy him those verses, where he makes one a fountain and one a serpent, for he never transformed 2 beings face to face in such a way that both their natures yielded their elements each to each. as in this case. Responding sympathetically to each other, the reptile cleft his tail into a fork, and the wounded sinner drew his feet together. The sinner's legs and thighs began to join. They grew together so that soon no trace of juncture could be seen from toe to loin. Point by point, the reptile's cloven tail grew to the form of what the sinner lost. One skin began to soften, one to scale. The armpits swallowed the arms, and the short shank of the reptile's forefeet simultaneously lengthened by as much as the man's arms shrank. Its hind feet twisted round themselves and grew the member man conceals. Meanwhile the wretch, from his one member, generated two. The smoke swelled up about them all the while. It tanned one skin, bleached the other. It stripped the hair from the man and grew it on the reptile. While one fell to his belly, the other rose, without once shifting the locked evil eyes below which they changed snouts as they changed pose. The face of the standing one drew up and in toward the temples, and from the excess matter that gathered there, ears grew from the smooth skin, while of the matter left below the eyes, the excess became a nose, at the same time forming the lips to an appropriate size. Here, the face of the prostrate felon slips, sharpens into a snout, and withdraws its ears as a snail pulls in its horns. Between its lips, the tongue, once formed for speech, thrust out a fork. The forked tongue of the other heals and draws into its mouth. The smoke has done its work. The soul that had become a beast went flitting and hissing over the stones, and after it, the other walked along, talking and spitting. Then, turning his new shoulders, said to the one that still remained, "It is Porso's turn to go crawling along the road, as I have done." Thus did the ballast of the seventh hold shift and reshift, and may the strangeness of it excuse my pen, if the tale is strangely told. And though all this confused me, they did not flee so cunningly, but what I was aware that it was Puccio Sciancato, alone of the three that first appeared. He kept his old form still. The other was he for whom you weep, Gavril. All right, that brings us to the end of the 25th canto. And that was an interesting one. We're sort of taking a shift across into a bit of body horror, which is, always a welcome sight when you're ever in a horror genre. Nothing quite strikes you in the ick as much as not being confident in the continuity of the flesh. That is a rough bit of torment, to continually be either burned and reformed when you're bitten by the snakes, or to be transformed and transfigured into a snake and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over through eternity. All right, let's continue with Canto 26, Circle 8, Bolgia 8, The Evil Counselors. Here we have another reminder that the copy, this PDF that we're reading from, is a second hand and has all the charm of that. The notes of the student, or the previous reader, previous owner, early on in the reading were a lot more profusive. So I do rather think that our previous reader may have not been a particularly consistent student. fell off their diligence. Because we haven't seen a whole lot of notes recently. Alright. Joy to you, Florence. Let your banners swell, beating their proud wings over land and sea, and that your name expands through all of hell. Among the thieves I found 5, who had been your citizens, to my shame. Nor yet shall you mount to great honor peopling such a den. But if the truth is dreamed of toward the morning, you soon shall feel what Prato and the others wish for you. And were that day of morning already come, it would not be too soon. So may it come, since it must, for it will weigh more heavily on me as I pass my noon. We left that place. My guide climbed stone by stone the natural stair by which we had descended, and drew me after him. So we passed on, and going our lonely way through that dead land among the crags and crevices of the cliff, the foot could make no way without the hand. I mourned among those rocks, and I mourn again when memory returns to what I saw. And more than usually, I curb the strain of my genius, lest it stray from virtue's course. So if some star, or a better being grant me merit, may I not find the gift cause for remorse. As many fireflies as the peasant sees when he rests on a hill and looks into the valley, where he tills or gathers grapes or prunes his trees. In that sweet season, when the face of him who lights the world rides north, and at the hour when the fly yields to the gnat and the air grows dim, such myriads of flames I saw shine through the gloom of the 8th abyss when I arrived, at the rim from which its bed comes into view. As he, the bears avenged, so fearfully beheld Elijah's chariot depart, the horses rise toward heaven, but could not see more than the flame, a cloudlet in the sky. Once it had risen, so within the fosse only those flames, forever passing by, were visible, ahead, to the right, to the left, for though each steals a sinner's soul from view, not one among them leaves a trace of the theft. I stood on the bridge, and leaned out from the edge, so far that but for a jut of rock I held to, I should have been sent hurtling from the ledge, without being pushed. And seeing me so intent, my guide said, "There are souls within those flames. Each sinner swathes himself in his own torment."
Master, I said, your words make me more sure, but I had seen already that it was so, and meant to ask what spirit must endure the pains of that great flame which splits away in 2 great horns, as if it rose from the pyre where Eteocles and Polynices lay.
He answered me, "Forever round this path Ulysses and Diomede move in such dress, united in pain, as once they were in wrath. There they lament the ambush of the horse, which was the door through which the noble seed of the Romans issued from its holy source. There they mourn that for Achilles slain, sweet Deidamia weeps even in death. There they recall the Palladium in their pain."
Master, I cried, I pray you, and re-pray, till my prayer becomes 1,000. If these souls can still speak from the fire, oh, let me stay until the flame draws near. Do not deny me, and see how fervently I long for it.
And he said to me, "Since what you ask is worthy, it shall be." Oh, hang on, we're dropping frames again. Oh, connectivity, oh, Comcast. See what you do to me. See what you do. All right, that was a short one. All right. And he said to me, "Since what you ask is worthy, it shall be. But be still and let me speak. For I know your mind already, and they perhaps might scorn your manner of speaking, since they were Greek." And when the flame had come where time and place seemed fitting to my guide, I heard him say these words to it: "Oh, you two souls who pace together in one flame, if my days above one favor in your eyes, if I have earned however much or little of your love in writing my high verses, do not pass by, but let one of you be pleased to tell where he, having disappeared from the known world, went to die." As if it fought the wind, the greater prong of the ancient flame began to quiver and hum. Then, moving its tip, as if it were the tongue that spoke, gave out a voice above the roar. "When I left Circe," it said, "who more than a year detained me near Gaeta, long before, Aeneas came and gave the place that name, not fondness for my son, nor reverence for my aged father did nor Penelope's claim to the joys of love could drive out of my mind the lust to experience the far-flung world and the failings and felicities of mankind. I put out on the high and open sea with only a single ship, and only those few souls who stayed true when the rest deserted me. As far as Morocco and as far as Spain, I saw both shores, and I saw Sardinia and the other islands of the open main. And I and my men were stiff and slow with age when we sailed at last into the narrow pass where, warning all men back from further voyage, Hercules' pillars rose upon our sight. Already I had left Ceuta on the left. Seville now sank behind me on the right. Shipmates, I said, who through 100,000 perils have reached the west, do not deny to the brief remaining watch our senses stand. Experience of the world beyond the sun. Greeks, you were not born to live like brutes, but to press on toward manhood and recognition. With this brief exhortation, I made my crew so eager for the voyage, I could hardly have held them back from it when I was through. And, turning our stern toward the morning, our bow toward night, we bore southwest, out of the world of man. We made wings of our oars for our fool's flight. That night, we raised the other pole ahead, with all its stars, and ours had so declined, it did not rise out of its ocean bed. 5 times since we had dipped our bending oars beyond the world, the light beneath the moon had waxed and waned, when dead upon our course we sighted, dark in space, a peak so tall I doubted any man had seen the like. Our cheers were hardly sounded when a squall broke hard upon our bow from the new land. 3 times it sucked the ship and the sea about as it pleased another to order and command. The 4th, the poop rose and the bow went down, till the sea closed over us and the light was gone. All right, that brings us to the end of the 26th canto. And hopefully, the end of that particular wraith and their lines, because I chose poorly for the voice for that specific shade. Wow. Whew. All right, so let's continue with the 27th canto, Circle 8, Bolgia 8, The Evil Counselors. When it had finished speaking, the great flame stood tall and shook no more. Now, as it left us, with the sweet poet's license, another came along that track, and our attention turned to the new flame. A strange and muffled roar rose from the single tip to which it burned. As the Sicilian bull, that brazen spit which bellowed first, and properly enough, with the lament of him whose file had tuned it. It made to bellow by its victims' cries in such a way that, though it was of brass, it seemed itself to howl and agonize. So lacking any way through or around the fire that sealed them in, the mournful words were changed into its language. When they found their way up to the tip, imparting to it the same vibration given them in their passage over the tongue of the concealed, sad spirit, we heard it say, "Oh, you at whom I aim my voice, and who are speaking Lombard, saying, 'Go now, I ask no more, just as I came. Though I may come a bit late to my turn, may it not annoy you to pause and speak a while? You see, it does not annoy me, and I burn. If you have fallen only recently to this blind world, from that sweet Italy, where I acquired my guilt, I pray you, tell me, is there peace or war in Romagna? For on earth I too was of those hills between Urbino and the fold from which the Tiber springs to birth." I was still staring at it from the dim edge of the pit, when my guide nudged me, saying, "This one is Italian. You speak to him." My answer was framed already. Without pause, I spoke these words to it. "O hidden soul, your sad Romagna is not, and never was, without war in her tyrants' raging blood. But none flared so openly when I left just now. Ravenna's fortunes stand as they have stood these many years. Polenta's eagles brood over her walls, and their pinions cover Servia. The city that so valiantly withstood the French and raised a mountain of their dead feels the green claws again. Still, in Ferruccio, the aged mastiff and his pup who shed Montagna's blood raven in their old ranges. The cities of Lamone and Santerno are led by the white den's lion, he who changes his politics with the compass, and as the city the Savio washes lies between plain and mountain. So it lives between freedom and tyranny. Now, I beg you, let us know your name. Do not be harder than one who has been to you. So, too, you will preserve your earthly fame." And when the flame had roared a while beneath the edge on which we stood, it swayed its tip to and fro, and then gave forth this breath: "If I believed that my reply were made to one who could ever climb to the world again, this flame would shake no more. But since no shade ever returned, if what I am told is true, from this blind world into the living light without fear of dishonor, I answer you. I was a man of arms, then took the rope of the Franciscans, hoping to make amends, and surely I should have won to all my hope, but for the great priest, may he rot in hell, who brought me back to all my earlier sins. And how and why it happened I wish to tell in my own words, while I was still encased in the pulp of bone my mother bore. My deeds were not of the lion, but of the fox. I raced through tangled ways, all wiles were mine from birth, and I won to such advantage with my arts that rumor of me reached the ends of the earth. When I saw before me all the signs of the time of life that cautions every man to lower his sail and gather in his lines, that which had pleased me once troubled my spirit.
and penitent and confessed, I became a monk. Alas, what joy I might have had of it! It was then the prince of the new Pharisees drew his sword and marched upon the Lateran, and not against the Saracen or the Jew. For every man that stood against his hand was a Christian soul. Not one had war on Acre, nor been a traitor in the Sultan's land. It was he abused his sacred vows and mine, his office and the cord I wore, which once made those it girded leaner. As Constantine sent for Silvestro to cure his leprosy, seeking him out among Soracte's cells, so this one, from his great throne, sent for me, to cure the fever of pride that burned his blood. He demanded my advice, and I kept silent, for his words seemed drunken to me. So it stood, until he said, Your soul need fear no wound. I absolve your guilt beforehand, and now teach me how to smash Penistrino to the ground. The gates of heaven, as you know, are mine, to open and shut, for I hold the two great keys, so easily let go by Celestine. His weighty arguments led me to fear. Silence was worse than sin. Therefore I said, Holy Father, since you clean me here of the guilt into which I fall, let it be done. Long promise and short observance is the road that leads to the short triumph of your throne. Later, when I was dead, St. Francis came to claim my soul. But one of the black angels said, Leave him. Do not wrong me. This one's name went into my book the moment he resolved to give false counsel. Since then, he has been mine, for who does not repent cannot be absolved. Nor can we admit the possibility of repenting a thing at the same time it is willed, for the two acts are contradictory. Miserable me! With what contrition I shuddered when he lifted me, saying, Perhaps you hadn't heard that I was a magician. He carried me to Minos. 8 times round his scabby back the monster coiled his tail, then, biting it in rage, he pawed the ground and cried, This one is for the thievish fire! And as you see, I am lost, accordingly, grieving in heart as I go in this attire.
His story told, the flame began to toss and writhe its horn, and so it left, and we crossed over to the arch of the next fosse, where, from the iron treasury of the Lord, the fee of wrath is paid, the sowers of discord. All right. That brings us to the next canto, and the next of the bulges of the 8th circle of hell. Canto 28, Circle 8, Bulge 9, The Sowers of Discord. Who could describe, even in words set free of metric and rhyme, and 1,000 times retold, the blood and wounds that now were shown to me? At grief so deep the tongue must wag in vain, the language of our sense and memory lacks the vocabulary of pain, of such pain. If one could gather all those who have stood through all of time on Puglia's fateful soil and wept for the red running of their blood in the war of the Trojans, and in that long war which left so vast a spoil of golden rings as we find written in Livy, who does not err, along with those whose bodies felt the wet and gaping wound of Robert Guiscard's lances, with all the rest whose bones are gathered yet at Ceprano, where every last Pugliese turned traitor, and with those from Tagliacozzo, where Alardo won without weapons, if all these were gathered, and one showed his limbs wrung through, another his lopped off, that could not equal the mutilations of the 9th Pit's crew. A wine tun when a stave or cant bar starts, does not split open as wide as one I saw split from his chin to the mouth with which man farts. Between his legs, all of his red guts hung, with the heart, the lungs, the liver, the gallbladder, and the shriveled sack that passes shit to the bung. I stood and stared at him from the stone shelf. He noticed me, and opening his own breast with both hands, cried, "See how I rip myself! See how Mahomet's mangled and split open! Ahead of me walks Ali in his tears, his head's cleft from the top to the chin, and all the other souls that bleed and mourn along this ditch were sowers of scandal and schism. As they tore others apart, so are they torn. Behind us, warden of a mangled horde, the devil who butchers us and sends us marching waits to renew our wounds with his long sword. When we have made the circuit of the pit, for by the time we stand again before him, all the wounds he gave us at last have knit. But who are you that gawk down from that sill, probably to put off your own descent to the pit you are sentenced to for your own evil?"
Death has not come for him. Guilt does not drive his soul to torment.
My sweet guide replied,
That he may experience all while yet alive. I, who am dead, must lead him through the drear and the darkened halls of hell, from round to round. And this is true as my own standing here.
More than 100 wraiths who were marching under the sill on which we stood paused at his words and stared at me, forgetting pain in wonder.
And if you do intend to return to see the sun again, and soon, tell Fra Dolcino, unless he longs to come and march with me, he would do well to check his groceries before the winter drives him from the hills and gives the victory to the Novarese.
Mahomet, 1 foot raised, had paused to say these words to me. When he had finished speaking, he stretched it out and down and moved away. Another, who had his throat slit and his nose slashed off as far as the eyebrows, and a wound where one of his ears had been, standing with those who stared at me in wonder from the pit, opened the grinning wound of his red gullet, as if it were a mouth, and said through it,
"O soul unforfeited to misery, and whom, unless I take you for another, I've seen above in our sweet Italy, if ever again you see the gentle plain that slopes down from Vercelli to Mercabo, remember the Pier de Medicina in pain, and announce this warning to the noblest two of Fano, Messrs. Guido and Angiolello, that unless our foresight sees what is not true, they shall be thrown from their ships into the sea and drown in the raging tides near La Cattolica to satisfy a tyrant's treachery. Neptune never saw so gross a crime in all the seas from Cyprus to Majorca, not even in pirate raids nor the archive time. The hard traitor, lord of the demesnes whose hills and streams one who walks here beside me will wish eternally he had never seen, will call them to a parley. But behind sweet invitations he will work it so they need not pray against Focara's wind."
And I to him,
"If you would have me bear your name to time, show me the one who found the sight of that land so harsh, and let me hear his story and his name."
He touched the cheek of one nearby, forcing the jaws apart, and said,
"This is the one. He cannot speak. The outcast settled Caesar's doubts that day beside the Rubicon by telling him a man prepared is a man hurt by delay."
How wretched Curio seemed to me, with a bloody stump in his throat in place of the tongue, which once had dared to speak so recklessly. And one among them, with both arms hacked through, cried out, raising his stumps on the foul air, while the blood bedaubed his face, "Remember too,
Mosca de Lamberti, alas! Who said, a thing done has an end, and with those words planted the fields of war with Tuscan dead, and brought about the death of all your clan, I said, and he, stung by new pain on pain, ran off, and in his grief he seemed a madman. I stayed to watch those broken instruments, and I saw a thing so strange I should not dare to mention it without more evidence. But my own clear conscience strengthens me. That good companion that upholds a man within the armor of his purity. I saw it there. I seemed to see it still. A body without a head that moved along like all the others in that spew and spill. It held the severed head by its own hair, swinging it like a lantern in its hand, and the head looked at us and wept in its despair. It made itself a lamp of its own head, and they were two in one and one in two, and how this can be, he knows who so commanded. And when it stood directly under us, it raised the head at arm's length toward our bridge, the better to be heard, and swaying thus it cried, "O living soul in this abyss, see that what a sentence has been passed unto me, and search all hell for one to equal this. When you return to the world and remember me, I am Bertrand de Born, and it was I who set the young king on to mutiny, son against father, father against son, as Ahitophel set Absalom and David, and since I parted those who should be one, in duty and in love I bear my brain divided from its source within this trunk, and walk here where my evil turns to pain, an eye for an eye to all eternity. Thus is the law of hell observed in me."
All right, that brings us to the end of Canto 28. So this was an interesting one. A lot of talking with those that are there, and a lot of interesting implications. Giving bad advice, willfully, of course, lands you pretty deep in the circles of hell. We are continually reminded that perceptions, times, and priorities all change. All change. Alright, let's see. We've got about 10 minutes yet in it tonight. Let's try and get through one more canto, and we'll see what we've got coming up in the 10th Bolgia of the 8th Circle of Hell. Canto 29, Circle 8, Bolgia 10, The Falsifiers, Class 1, Alchemists. The sight of that parade of broken dead had left my eyes so sotted with their tears I longed to stay and weep. But Virgil said, "What are you waiting for? Why do you stare as if you could not tear your eyes away from the mutilated shadows passing there? You did not act so in the other pits. Consider, if you mean perhaps to count them, this valley and its train of dismal spirits winds 22 miles round. The moon already is under our feet. The time we have is short, and there is much that you have yet to see."
"Had you known that what I was seeking," I replied, "you might perhaps have given me permission to stay on longer."
As I spoke, my guide had started off already, and I, in turn, had moved along behind him. Thus I answered as we moved along the cliff.
"Within that cavern, upon whose brim I stood so long to stare, I think a spirit of my own blood mourns the guilt that sinners find so costly there."
And the master then, "Hereafter, let your mind turn its attention to more worthy matters, and leave him to his fate among the blind. For by the bridge and among that shapeless crew, I saw him point to you with threatening gestures.
and I heard him called Jerry de Bello. You were occupied at the time with that headless one, who in his life was the master of Altafort, and did not look that way, so he moved on.
Oh, my sweet guide, I answered. His death came by violence, and is not yet avenged by those who share his blood, and thus his shame. For this he surely hates his kin, and therefore, as I suppose, he would not speak to me, and in that he makes me pity him the more.
We spoke of this until we reached the edge, from which, had there been light, we could have seen the floor of the next pit. Out from that ledge, Malebolge's final cloister lay outspread, and all of its lay brethren might have been in sight, but for the murk. And from those dead, such shrieks and strangled agonies shrilled through me like shafts, but barbed with pity, that my hands flew to my ears, if all the misery that crams the hospitals of pestilence in Maremma, Valdacchiano, and Sardinia, in the summer months when death sits like a presence on the marsh air, were dumped into one trench that might suggest their pain. And through the screams, putrid flesh spread up its sickening stench. Still bearing left, we passed from the long sill to the last bridge of Malebolge. There, the reeking bottom was more visible. There, high justice, sacred mistress of the First Father, reigns eternally over the falsifiers in their distress. I doubt it could have been such pain to bear, the sight of the Aegean people dying that time, when such malignance rode the air, that every beast, down to the smallest worm, shriveled and died. It was after that great plague that the ancient people, as the poets affirm, were reborn from the ants. As it was to see the spirits lying heaped on one another in the dank bottom of that fetid valley. One lay gasping on another's shoulder, one on another's belly, and some were crawling on hands and knees among the broken boulders. Silent, slow, step by step, we moved ahead, looking at and listening to those souls too weak to raise themselves from their stone bed. I saw there two pans that are put one against the other to hold their warmth. They were covered with great scabs from head to foot. No stable boy in a hurry to go home, or for whom his master waits impatiently, ever scrubbed harder with his currycomb than those two spirits of the stinking ditch, scrubbed at themselves with their own bloody claws to ease the furious burning of the itch. And as they scrubbed and clawed themselves, their nails drew down the scabs the way a knife scrapes bream or some other fish with even larger scales. "Oh, you," my guide called out to one, "you there, who rip your scabby mail as if your fingers were claws and pincers, tell us if this lair counts any Italians among those who lurk in its dark depths. So may your busy nails eternally suffice you for your work." "We both are Italian for unending loss, you see before you," he replied in tears. "But who are you who come to question us?" "I am a shade," my guide and master said, "who leads this living man from pit to pit, to show him hell, as I have been commanded." The sinners broke apart as he replied, and turned convulsively to look at me, as others did who overheard my guide. My master then, ever concerned for me, turned and said, "Ask them whatever you wish." And I said to these two wraiths of misery,
"So may the memory of your names and actions not die forever from the minds of men in that first world, but live for many sons. Tell me who you are and of what city. Do not be shamed by your nauseous punishment into concealing your identity."
I was a man of Arezzo," one replied, "and Albert of Siena had me burned. I am not here for the deed for which I died,
It is true that, jokingly, I said to him once, I know how to raise myself and fly through the air, and he, with all the eagerness of a dunce, wanted to learn, because I could not make a Daedalus of him, for no other reason he had his father burn me at the stake. But Minos, that infallible, had me hurled here to the final bulge of the 10 for the alchemy I practiced in the world.
And I to the poet.
Was there ever a race more vain than the Sienese? Even the French, compared to them, seemed full of modest grace.
And the other leper answered mockingly,
Except King Strika, who by careful planning managed to live so and spend so moderately, and Niccolo, who in this time above was first of all the shoots in that rank garden to discover the costly use of the clove, and accepting the brilliant company of talents in which Caesar squandered his vineyards and his woods, and
Abacliato displayed his intelligence.
But if you wish to know him who joins your cry against the Sienese, study my face with care, and let it make its own reply. So you will see I am the suffering shadow of Capocchio, who, by practicing alchemy, falsified the metals. And you must know, unless my more recollection strays, how good an ape I was of nature's ways.
all right. That brings us to the end of the 29th canto, and that'll be all we read tonight. We've got about 2 minutes till the ads. We probably get one snooze in so we can do our regular closing, and we should be able to wrap things up neatly tonight. So we've had a little bit more adventure in this last little bit. The conversations with the damned, the interactions with their jailers and the demons trapped in hell, and the various punishments that we see throughout. It's an interesting depiction, and again, I'm reminded of how crazy it is that this one poem really defined the imagination and continuing image that so many people have of what hell even is. All of this is just spun from whole cloth. He's making it up as he goes, really. Not to mention that he's sort of dragging people's names through the mud and complaining about people who are generally not well looked upon in Italian rumor mills. But it's just very cool to me that a single author was able to influence the public consciousness and subconsciousness for generations, for hundreds of years. That all of this was just something fresh and new that's just been accepted as the way things are, a canon. Very cool, and it's going to live on forever at the way things are going. And it's a crazy idea. Alright, we're going to go ahead and finish up for tonight. We, as always, will try and raid out to someone. I like to take part in the Twitch thing, but let's go ahead and have our wind down and wrap up. For those of you who are new here, or if you're joining us for the first time in a while, thank you. Thank you for joining us. As always, we always stream both on YouTube and Twitch. So, if you haven't checked it out yet, over on the YouTube side, we have all of our VODs, forever and always. Links should be available on Twitch, or vice versa as capable. If you're over on YouTube right now, a follow to the channel, or a subscription to the channel, and a like on the stream goes a long way toward convincing the algorithm that we do some fun things, and maybe to send some new friends our way. If you're over on Twitch, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate follows, and that's really all I could possibly ask for. And I just hope you've enjoyed your time as we continue our exaltation and exploration of great literature from across the ages. All right, so let's go ahead and see if there's anyone. Generally, I like to go toward other readers, but let's see what's going on tonight. I'll check people that I follow first. See people that are just getting started. Well, okay, let me see. Hime Otsugi is in the middle of a donathon, and we haven't been able to catch them in any of their streams yet, but they've been going for about 5 hours. Let me take a peek and see how deep they are and if they're going to keep going for a bit. Let's try it. So we're gonna be raiding over to Hime Utsugi, and I hope you give them our very best vibes as we join in. They are in the middle of their donathon. They've been going for about 2 weeks now, and just a good time to stop in and give them our support, whether it be just watching or whatever the fancy strikes you. All right, our next session will be tomorrow as we continue our unarchived reading of Stephen King's The Shining. I hope you enjoy and look forward to that reading. It will be a little bit earlier than normal. So, until then, have a wonderful evening, and thank you for joining us. Bye.
I think that's going to be it for today's stream. Oh. Ray, hi, Arthur. What were you reading? Okay. That's okay. I'll stick around and